Kansas City Sports Update Studios. Welcome to Kingdom Radio, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. Brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Join Kris and Richard on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Player FM, Castbox, and all third-party applications. Check us out on Facebook platforms such as Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead Update. And if you cannot find us there, Google or search Kingdom Radio and Kansas City Chiefs, and you will find us. Welcome to the Kingdom.
How are we doing, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome to Kingdom Radio. I'm your host, Richard Smith, along with my co-host and senior NFL analyst, Kris Chavez. And hey, we've got Mexico City this week on Monday Night Football. Chiefs are the away team for this game, Chiefs and Chargers, with huge implications for the playoffs and the AFC West at hand. Look, the Chiefs got a lot of work to do. So to break that down with me this evening, we got Kris with us. So Kris, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, watching Baylor beat up on Oklahoma right now.
Oh yeah, what's the score to that game?
28-3, and Jalen Hurts is having an awful night.
An awful night. Well, I'll have to say, we'll touch base on this real quick. Another player that's having an awful night, which was an awful injury, was the Alabama quarterback going down with a dislocated hip and possibly some other injuries with that, out for the season. So that's a huge blow for Alabama. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. It's a tough blow for the kid. He's an obvious superstar and a Heisman Trophy candidate. And it really just a huge blow for college football.
Yeah, he was the projected first quarterback to be taken off the draft board in April's draft. And with this second injury this season, there's a chance that teams are going to be labeling him as injury prone, and he's going to be dropping down out of the first spot. There's a chance that he could still be taken in the mid to late end of the first round. If he comes back and he's 100% healthy, there's a chance he could go in the beginning, but I think it's going to be very difficult for him to come back in time for the draft.
It's a tough break for the kid, and we hate to see that no matter what level, what team. You never want to see a kid go down like that. But here in Chiefs Kingdom, like we said, we have the Chiefs versus Chargers in Mexico City, and we're going to get on to that here in just a few, but we're going to touch base here around the NFL just a bit.
This is Around the NFL, brought to you by Pizza Shop Platte City. Go grab yourself a butcher block. Best meat lovers in Kansas City. Pizza Shop Platte City, proud sponsor of Kingdom Radio. Pizza Shop Platte City.
All right, this is the Around the NFL segment, brought to you by Platte City Pizza Shop. Go in there and get yourself a butcher block. Best meat lovers in Kansas City. And that is our main sponsor. Thank you, Platte City Pizza Shop. We appreciate everything you've done for Kingdom Radio. Kris, let's get right into NFL talk here this week. There's been a lot that's gone on. It has been a crazy week in the NFL. Some insane incidents and, some stuff going on today that I don't think the NFL ever saw coming. So, look, let's talk about this Myles Garrett incident with Mason Rudolph and Marcus Pouncey getting involved as well. But, during the Pittsburgh and Cleveland game, it got extremely chippy and was probably the worst on-field brawl that I've ever seen on an NFL field. In one case, Myles Garrett ripped Mason Rudolph's helmet off and hit him with it. And that is extremely unacceptable on every single level. And look, he's already been handed down a suspension for the rest of the season. Marcus Pouncey's been handed down a 3-game suspension. Mason Rudolph, though, has not been handed a suspension, and I am not in favor of that decision by the NFL. But Kris, I'm going to let you get into depth here about this whole scenario because it is probably the wildest thing that I have seen in all my years of watching the NFL.
Okay, so just to kind of get a little bit more in depth with the penalties that were handed out.
Yes, please do.
Garrett has been suspended indefinitely. It will be at least the rest of the season and the postseason without pay. Depending on what the NFL determines in the offseason, there's a chance potentially that the suspension could carry on into next season as well. The Steelers center Maurkice Pouncey, who was suspended for 3 games without pay for taking Garrett down to the ground, throwing some punches, and then kicking him in the head while he was still down, being held down by David DeCastro. The Browns defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi was suspended without pay for a single game, and he and Maurkice Pouncey are also being fined as well. The thing that I find a little egregious here, or erroneous, is that Ogunjobi is not being suspended for 2 games. The reason being is that the Browns and Steelers play again here in 2 weeks. So I think that it would probably be a best idea for everybody involved in that to be out for that game. But moving on, so like you had said, Rudolph is not being suspended. However, he is going to be fined. But when you watch the entire video, well, he instigated it. By no means am I saying that justifies what Myles Garrett did. But he played a very serious role in that in 2 separate moments in the entirety of the event. And he needs to get more than just a fine. But in addition to all of these fines and suspensions, both the Steelers and the Browns were both fined $250,000 each.
Yes, which in my mind is a just fine for both franchises, because that's completely unacceptable behavior on both teams. Now, I understand the aspect of protecting your quarterback. You know, Maurkice Pouncey obviously comes in. I don't agree with him kicking him in the head. There's a lot there. And I will say, Kris, look, Mason Rudolph absolutely instigated it all. So I watched him kick Myles Garrett. I watched him twist his head basically around, try to rip his helmet off in probably the worst manner you possibly could. And if I was Myles Garrett, I'd be extremely aggravated about that scenario as well. And I can't say that I would rip Mason Rudolph's helmet off and bash him over the head with it and take it to that level. But at some point, there has to be a just penalty handed down on everybody involved. And I don't think that Mason Rudolph got near what he should. I think he should have a 3-game suspension handed down to him for all of that. He is not a victim in this. In a standard he is, but in the same respect, that's a scenario that could have been, squashed or it should have never been started. Mason Rudolph is the fuel to the fire.
Yeah, well, in addition, you look at the situation that the Steelers were in at that point in the game, and there's 8 seconds left on the clock, and the Browns are up by 2 touchdowns. Why do you have your starters still in the game? There is absolutely no way whatsoever that the Steelers are going to be able to score 2 touchdowns in 8 seconds. And so, to a degree, I kind of agree with former offensive coordinator for the Steelers as well as head coach for the Chiefs, Todd Haley, that some onus of the situation does fall on Freddie Kitchens, the head coach of the Browns. He should not have had his starters out there in that situation. That's the first point. Mm-hmm. And then, to follow that up, Myles Garrett, it wraps up Mason Rudolph immediately after Rudolph throws the ball. Garrett does not see the ball get thrown, wraps him up, takes him to the ground, just like every defensive lineman has been taught to do.
Right.
Other than Braylon Speaks with Tom Brady. But Sorry, I had to throw that in there. But it was a completely legit football play. Rudolph takes offense to it, and he reaches up and pulls on Garrett's face mask, throws up a kick. I don't know if it landed or not, but is also putting a twist on the helmet so that it's wrenching Garrett's head in a non-natural way.
Correct.
Garrett takes offense to that. He rips Rudolph up off the ground by his face mask, and then all hell breaks loose. However, up until the point where he swings the helmet at Rudolph, we've seen this all before. And up until that moment, and like maybe a one-game suspension could be had there.
Yes.
Maybe.
If that.
Yeah, if that. Maybe just some hefty fines. But as soon as he swung that helmet at an unprotected head, and all bets are off, because you're already in a extremely rough sport where you're already worried about head injuries and trauma and the long-term effects of, and then you have a player going and hitting another player in the head intentionally when the head is unprotected. That
essentially makes the helmet a weapon at that point.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like in wrestling, if a guy uses a table, a trash can, whatever, he's using a weapon. It's not something that is involved with the sport. So in that manner.
So with that being said, me and you had talked about this before we got on air, and it's probably something that should not be brought to football. Do you think that there's a just reason to look at criminal charges for Myles Garrett on this situation, or do they handle it internally and move on with the football season?
I think you have to handle it internally because you look at baseball, where pitchers are able to throw intentionally at the batters. They have every opportunity to not throw a fastball at a batter's head. On the flip side, they have every opportunity to do that. Yes. And it's well within their right as a pitcher to do that.
Correct.
While they have to deal with the repercussions of that, the suspensions, the fines, what will probably end up being a bench-clearing brawl, but they can choose to throw that pitch. As well as in hockey, every single night, every period, it seems like, there are fights that break out. And are you really going to open up the door to where a player who is involved in a fight can then go and sue his attacker, or criminal charges have to happen to any player that's involved in a fight for assault and battery? I think you have to allow the leagues the opportunity to handle it and to govern themselves in a manner appropriately. Right.
And this is a situation where, obviously in my mind, it was a reactionary, discipline that was handed down by the NFL. Like, there wasn't much time for them to think about what they want to do. The next morning it was done, over with, suspend for the rest of the year, which I'm sure that was the first thought in their mind as soon as they saw that. But I want to see what else comes of this, because I do not feel like this is over by any stretch of the imagination for Mason Rudolph or Myles Garrett. I think that the NFL is going to take more action because of the reaction of analysts and everybody in the NFL about Mason Rudolph. That was completely unacceptable behavior, and what was the foundation and cornerstone of everything that happened. But I will say, Myles Garrett, you've got to keep your cool. That's on him. Mason Rudolph cannot control, the reaction of Myles Garrett. But I promise you, if somebody's trying to torque my neck, I'm going to react to it, and probably in a way outside of what I would normally react to things like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you feel that your health, your safety is being threatened, you are going to react.
And I feel like Myles Garrett's safety was in question with that. I mean, you watch the replay over and over and over again. I mean, he was torquing his neck sideways trying to rip the helmet off. That's the opposite way that you take a helmet off or put a helmet on. That was absolutely out of spite and hatred and anger, and he was trying to hurt him.
Yeah, and what I think also ended up affecting the punishment by the NFL, which I do want to give them accolades for reacting so quickly to this, because normally in these situations you have to end up having to wait a week or two to see what the punishment is. But I think what also weighed on it is that Myles Garrett already has 2 prior suspensions and fines this season for his behavior on the field. And just like we saw with Vontaze Burfict, his history is eating at his punishment. Now, what I'm also going to say is that, excuse me, that I think that it sets a very, very bad tone for the NFL to react with such a long suspension for him in this regard. Because they've already set the precedent that somebody who beats a woman off the field can be suspended for less time than what happens on the field. And nobody else is really talking about that, but I view that as a very big black eye on the NFL in this instance. They need to figure out a just way to punish their players who misbehave on and off the field. And I'll touch base on that here in a second, but I want to hear your reaction to that point really quick.
Well, it goes just the same. And look, I'm not taking anything away from what you were just saying, because that behavior is extremely unacceptable. But it's in the same regards, it blows my mind that a player can rip off somebody's helmet, hit him in the head with it, and he's going to get the same suspension as a player that got caught using performance-enhancing drugs. It seems way more extreme than something to that nature. And, you compare, everything that we just brought to the table. I think something needs to happen, with the, certain levels of discipline and how the NFL handles it, because it seems to be really sporadic. And, it seems like it's dependent upon the player. And when you go to the NFL Players Association, that's something that needs to be brought to the table, because there is there's not justice, I don't think, within that system, as far as the level of extremity. This was extreme. This was extremely huge when it comes to a brawl on the field. We've never seen this before, and I don't think that the level of punishment fits the scenario.
Okay, so to follow up on what you're saying, Myles Garrett and Ogunjobi, both of the Browns players, are both planning to appeal their suspensions.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. But to further your point and to go back to what I was saying, and this is my proposal, because coming up here in a few years, the collective bargaining agreement runs out, and the NFL and the Players Association, the union, are going to have to come up with a new agreement. In that agreement, this is my proposal. Mm-hmm. The NFL sets up, the NFL and the Players Union sets up a committee that is the, I don't know what the heck you would call it. We're going to say it the punishment committee. We can rename it later.
Fair enough.
And the NFL comes up with a list of all the former players who have ever played the game. They have a list of all the current players that have ever played the game and former head coaches. The players, all active players, vote on 3 former players, 3 current players, one of which has to be a member of the union.
It's like a discipline committee.
Exactly. And then a former head coach. Okay? Mm-hmm. These guys work for the NFL.
Right.
They do not work... No, excuse me. They work with the NFL. They do not work for the NFL. The NFL pays them. They represent the players' union because ultimately the players need to start controlling themselves and managing and governing themselves. Because it really frustrates me when all of these suspensions are handed out and then every single time these players go and they appeal and they win. And I think it means more when your colleagues are telling you, you're wrong, this is what we are saying you need to do. So going back to the scenario, the punishment committee, he makes the proposal that the player did this, they should be suspended for 3 games. If the NFL, which in this case is Goodell, the commissioner, if he doesn't feel that the punishment meets the infraction, then he can increase it. Now here's the fun part. The player who has committed the infraction can't appeal the committee's directive.
I like where you're going.
If the committee suspends him for 3 games, he has to take those 3 games.
Okay, so I have a question.
Okay.
So you said that Roger Goodell could change what the committee laid down upon the player by increasing it. I think that it would be a great thing to also implement, to keep the power within this committee that Roger Goodell cannot go underneath the given punishment that the committee handed down to the player. He can only increase it.
Okay, so from a PR standpoint, it would be career suicide-esque to make that sort of move. Because unless he has some sort of inside information that there was a reason why the player did X, Y, or Z, blah, blah, whatever. But that information should be shared with the committee. The commissioners would never, ever undermine that committee because it would make no sense to undermine the players and the coaches who are tasked with governing the NFL players' behavior and actions on and off the field. Okay,
now, and I understand personally what you're saying, but on an NFL business standpoint as a whole, with all due respect when I say this, do you understand who we're talking about here?
Yes.
And so,
but when has he? Okay, well, on very few occasions has he ever under punished the player for their actions and behavior.
And I'm not saying on that standpoint. I'm just saying overall, when we think of Roger Goodell, I mean, we'll put it this way. He doesn't have a lot of fans, and he's okay with that. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just put it that way. That's the lightest I can put it with Roger Goodell. But no, I think you're right. We established that committee, and so this is going to... And so I don't assume you're saying this is an outside agency hired by the NFL. So there's no biased opinions. There's no, it's, hey, this is the panel of people. The NFL's hiring them to bring them in to do this internal investigation.
Yes, and it has this checks and balances built into it. So the punishment is ultimately controlled by the players and the players' union, but it's then presented to the NFL, and if the NFL / Goodell approve of it, they sign off on it. If they want to change it and increase, they can, but then the player has the opportunity to appeal, and then the appeal goes to a different committee, a different group. But then if so going to with the scenario that you just brought up, let's say, for instance, that Goodell wants to decrease the suspension or the punishment, then that ends up going back to the committee, and in some way, shape, or form, they need to vote on it, and some percentage need to say agree or disagree. We can work all of that out later on.
Right.
But at least in theory, in my mind, this puts the onus on the players, and I think it means more because the players would be voting in people who are actually going to represent and quote-unquote govern that committee with respect and hold it with or take the job very seriously, so that you wouldn't have a situation like this where Myles Garrett does something like this, or any player does something like this and gets a 1-game suspension.
Yes, and it's not. And so when you bring an outside source like that in, it also takes away the scenario of it doesn't matter about the NFL as a whole. It doesn't matter about the season or the player on the team. It's not going to hinder or make a suspension any longer or shorter, which that is a great thing because, look, if you're a star player in the league and you do something, as egregious as Myles Garrett pulled the other evening, you should be sat for the year and possibly never brought back to the NFL. It doesn't matter what your stature is in the NFL, if you're a superstar or not. And I feel like that would be, a flawless system to hand down the right suspensions the right way and take the season, out of it, because that stuff matters to the NFL. It matters who's on the field, Yeah,
and I think that guys like Tony Dungy, who truly love and respect this game, would be a fantastic person to have on that committee because they've been involved with this game for 30 plus years.
It's funny that you say that because that was the first person that came to my mind as well, and then a coach like Bill Cowher. And I know you said one coach, but it's when you think of the potentials, you could have some really, really brilliant minds that will take heed of the seriousness behind stuff like this, because you think of the other player and you think of the other players' families and kids and things and the future of everything that's involved outside of football. And I think that's the most important thing. And, guys like Tony Dungy or Bill Cowher or, Jerry Rice, as a former player, people like that, that's who you'd want in this committee.
Yeah, absolutely. And one guy that I would think would be an interesting add to the committee, because when he was on the field, when he was playing, especially when he was younger, he was very much a knucklehead. But then in his later years and after years, especially after he got voted into the Hall of Fame, he really did a 180 and became much more of a respecter of the game in Michael Irvin. And he came up with the idea for all of the draftees to go to the Hall of Fame and take a tour and get to learn the history of the NFL. And I commend him for that, because that shows that he really is all about the game and the sport. And I think that having a mind like his would be interesting to have on the committee. I'm not saying that he should, but I think it would be interesting to have him involved in that discussion as a possible representative.
And hey, at this point, it's really neither here nor there, because this is something that doesn't even exist. So I'm going to pull us back in here, and we're going to have to move on, because we spent a lot of time here on this Mason Rudolph and Myles Garrett situation, and it is unfortunate, and I'm anxious to see what else the league has to hand down for this whole scenario. But moving on, Colin Kaepernick had his NFL workout today. I believe that was in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes.
So look, he had 20 scouts show up to his workout, and in the very last minute, Colin Kaepernick changed locations because the NFL denied him rights to have the media cover his workout. So he went to another private location and held his workout. But because he pulled the antic of changing locations the last minute, the teams, the count of 20 teams went down to a count of 6 scouts attended his workout at this other location. But just to have 6 scouts show up, I think is a testament to what the NFL is really thinking with Kaepernick. I'm not sure what's going to come of this, but that last minute change really hindered his chances. Split them more than in half, down to like 29%.
Well, there was another potential reason as to why, and I'm not disputing what you said. I think that would certainly have a part of it. But it's also being reported that he had some sort of request, or I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but some sort of insurance deal. So throughout this tryout process, if he gets injured, he gets his medical's covered, blah blah, something to that effect.
I see.
The NFL had sent it over earlier in the week, and then I believe it was reported that yesterday or early this morning it was sent back by he and his team with some changes and other requests, and the NFL and he couldn't agree on it, and that was another component that led to the him not showing up to his workout.
Well, I will say this. The Chiefs were reported as one of the teams that had sent a scout to watch this workout. Now, whether or not the Chiefs ended up at the final location to, actually witness it, I'm not sure. There's been a lot of mixed feelings about the Chiefs organization even making an appearance. And yes, it is a gut check call, but at some point, this is a franchise decision, and the Kansas City Chiefs aren't going to think about the fans in this scenario because it's a business move. And, why we wouldn't go check out, a prospect that could possibly land on another team. I don't know. I don't see why we wouldn't put some eyes in front of a quarterback that, that could possibly do some harm, in the AFC. So it's one of those scenarios. Were we serious about going to pick up, a player like Kaepernick? No, we're not going to sign him. Is it nice to see what he's doing? Absolutely. So what are your thoughts on the Chiefs, ultimately sending a scout down there to take a look and see what Colin's doing?
You brought up a really good point that I think a lot of people aren't taking into consideration, that he could potentially end up in the AFC West, and we were there to scout him out. Mm-hmm. There's rumors that Phillip Rivers is going to be contemplating his football future after this season. Looking at the Denver scenario, they have a potential future quarterback, but they still have Flacco on the roster. Maybe their future quarterback isn't ready yet. They could potentially bring in Kaepernick. I think that the Raider job is pretty safe with Carr. So you've got 50% of the teams in the AFC West that could potentially be looking at a quarterback next season.
Right.
Kaepernick being at 32 years old, well, there's a chance he could still have some tread on his tires. And a team like the Chargers or Broncos could be desperate enough to bring him in, and maybe not necessarily to be the starter, but at least a competent backup.
Yeah, I mean,
why not send a scout to go and see what he still has? How does he look now in comparison to 3, 4, 5 years ago? And to at least know what we would be up against, as opposed to going in completely blind and having not had any tape on him for 3 or 4 years.
Right, and that's that. This is a scenario where obviously every single scout or team that was there was looking at the future of their organization. I promise you that out of the 20 teams that were there were probably just a handful of teams that were really interested in him. The rest were there to scout him. And if you noticed in all of the articles, the Chiefs sent a scout there. They sent a scout just to watch him. So Kansas City, I would say, calm down and understand that was just a scenario where we wanted to see where this kid is at for the sole purpose of what Kris just mentioned, of the two teams, the AFC West, that have been, one desperate for a quarterback and the other team that could be transitioning here really soon. So with that being said, look, Kaepernick got his workout in. He's trying to make his way back to the NFL. I was surprised that this even happened, and we'll have our ears open to hear what's going on from there. So we're going to talk about the AFC West here, because this is the most important scenario for the Chiefs. We're sitting here at 6-4 on a season where we thought we would be sitting in a better position at this point, but in the same respect, we've battled a lot of injuries all season long, and I feel like we're lucky to be where we're at right now. Especially, look, the Chiefs have a half-game lead in the AFC West over the Raiders, and obviously we play the Chargers, so this game has probably been bumped into the most important game of the season, and obviously a must-win for the Kansas City Chiefs to keep their position in the AFC West and also, keep their playoff scenario at least within the division leaders. So, Kris, let's talk about the AFC West. Obviously, Kansas City's still sitting at the top, but we have a lot of work to do in this later half of the season. What's going on? What are we doing here in the AFC West?
Okay, so obviously the Chargers game is going to matter a lot for our standing and staying on top of the division. But I think that when you look at the rest of our schedule, when we come back from the bye, we lead off with the Raiders, which, let's say, for instance, we come into that game tied for the division lead. Mm-hmm. That game is going to be tremendous coming out of the bye, and we have to get that win.
Absolutely.
Then we follow that up with the Patriots, which I think and I feel like Andy Reid is going to want to send a message, but at the same side, he's also not going to show all of his cards and not give Belichick stuff to prepare for.
Okay, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to say this. While we play the Chargers, the Raiders play the Bengals, and I really just want to throw that out there because that has meaning as well. As to how big of a victory this is going to be for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chargers are, a tougher opponent, for the Chiefs and the Raiders, compared to the Bengals. So that kind of adds some more spice to this scenario.
Yeah, and I'll get into a little bit more here in a second, but yes. So then we follow up the Patriots with a game against the Broncos in Arrowhead. Or in Kansas City at Arrowhead. Then we play in Chicago, which, with as abysmal as they've looked, that should be a very good win. And then we finish out the season with the Chargers again. And I think that last game against the Chargers is going to be very dependent upon how this game goes. Because right now the Chargers are missing a lot of players, a lot of their star players, up-and-coming players, due to injuries. But they're also sitting on the brink of being knocked out of the playoff picture.
Right.
If they lose tomorrow, they're going to be 4-7, and it's going to be essentially impossible to get into the playoffs at 9-7. They'd have to win out, and there's no way for them to do that, as the last 3 games of their schedule is Oakland, Minnesota, and the Chiefs. So I really expect for San Diego to come out swinging in the game tomorrow, because, for one, their playoff picture is on the line, and then 2, Rivers' last chance at ever getting to a Super Bowl is realistically this year, because he's not getting any younger and he's not getting any better.
This is very true. He's been staying at a consistent level his entire career, which I will say is very Alex Smith-like. Great numbers, but has never really done anything in the big game. So let's talk about.
Let's look at the Raiders, which you also brought up.
Yes,
and they're closer to us in the standings. They get the Bengals this weekend. They get the Jets on our bye week. And so realistically, we're probably going to be going into that game with them with a share of the division lead. Then they follow up with us with Tennessee, and then they get the Jaguars. So they're going to get back-to-back 2 ground and pound, tough running teams.
Right.
And I think that they'll be lucky if they come out with 1 win. I don't think that they come out with 2 in those 2 games back-to-back. Then they finish up on the road with the Chargers and then the Broncos. 2 division rivalry games. Those are always up in the air, and you can never really rule anybody out in those, regardless of whether you have a Broncos record or a Raiders record where you're actually winning.
Yes, and look, Chiefs Kingdom, we have got to the point in the season where the schedule matters. Every single team remaining on every single team's schedule matters. And it's a scenario where I think that Kansas City we're sitting even there with the Raiders in my mind as far as strength of schedule headed out, and I think that we can overcome this due to the certain timing of games. You said that Oakland has 2 divisional games to wrap up the season. You know, we obviously have the Chargers to wrap up the season. If we beat the Chargers Monday, I feel very fortunate and comfortable moving forward, and I look for the rest of our AFC West games to be a little bit easier for us and less impactful. And not that they won't have impact, but look how far our back will be against the wall if we lose to the Chargers and the Raiders turn around and beat the Bengals. And who was the team following week?
I'm sorry, for who? For us?
For the Raiders. Who was the team the following week for the Raiders?
Well, after us is the Titans.
The Titans. Okay. So yes, the Titans. No, that's not. Sorry, that's not what I was asking. But that's okay. We're gonna keep moving forward. But so I think that this game is probably the most important game of the season to this point. Obviously, everything that it means in the AFC West, our half-game lead, the way our bye week, falls, where the Raiders' schedule falls, we have to keep winning moving forward. And I think that starts with, being more disciplined within our team. Because this turned into a race here in the division, something that I'm sure all of Chiefs Kingdom thought we would probably just run away with, from the start of the season, giving our track record the last 5 years. But this is definitely a battle. We're in there. We're in there right in the thick of things, and I think we can take care of business. And do I question it more than, years past and games past? Yes, I do. But I still think we can get it done. It's looking great. Unfortunately, we have had some injuries, players and our depth on the offensive line done for the season. And the injuries, we're getting players back, but we're still, stacking injuries up. It's, Kris, how important is this? How important is this?
Well, and like you touched on, with the plethora of injuries that we've had, for us to be where we're at, still leading the division.
Right.
And, I mean, that's impressive.
Absolutely.
And like, we're going to touch on this here in a second, but coming back into this game as healthy as we possibly could be and have been since week 2, I think that if we can continue staying healthy, I know we're going to get nicked up here and there, but if we don't lose any more players for significant amounts of time throughout the rest of the season, and I'm expecting for us to potentially win out throughout the rest of the season.
And we really could.
And, you can call me a homer for that, but if we stay healthy, I think we can do it.
And, with Eric Fisher coming back to, the lineup, that is great. I mean, Patrick Mahomes can stand back there for a little bit and really let the ball loose. And it's just, this seems like a scenario within Chiefs Kingdom that when it comes to losses, you can't take the bad and then completely forget about all the good that has happened, throughout the season. And I feel like that that happens, with every loss that the Chiefs have. I remember a point where, we had our first loss, and it was the end of the world in Chiefs Kingdom, and it's at a point where, look, we should be extremely happy where we are and what we've overcome, because I promise you a lot of teams would not be in the position the Kansas City Chiefs are sitting right now. So with that being said, Kansas City, we're going to go into halftime.
Kansas City, it is halftime. Thank you for tuning in to Kingdom Radio. We will return momentarily.
And welcome back to Kingdom Radio. That was halftime. Hey, look, sometimes Kris and I need a little break from the action here, because, hey, look, that's a lot of information being spit out and a lot of emotion, too, because we love what we're talking about here. And sometimes we just need a little break to breathe. So let's get into this, the Chiefs-Chargers game here in depth. It's in Mexico City, a Monday Night Football game, and I will say, to start this out, the Chiefs have not done a very good job in primetime games, and that's something that I would love to see us change. This is absolutely a climate where Mahomes could air out the ball, possibly further than he's ever thrown it, and he's got the weapons to do it. And look, so the Chargers have gone back-to-back games with over 145 yards rushing on the ground, and obviously that's something that's been exploited within the Chiefs' defense all season long. We've had a few weeks here and there. We shut down the run, but for the most part, look, the Kansas City Chiefs are the 5th worst rushing team in the league. We've had 5 100 yards rushers against us, so obviously we need to stop the run, and Patrick Mahomes needs to have an electric evening, as well as the rest of the team. So, Kris, let's get into this real quick. Mexico City, Chiefs, Chargers, what do you have for us?
So first and foremost, I want to throw this out there that I'm really upset with how the Chiefs have been preparing, or lack thereof, for playing at that altitude. For them to just say, oh, well, we can play in Denver, we'll be okay. It's not the same, because Denver is not truly at a mile-high altitude. Estadio Azteca is a very different animal altogether. And if you ever watched the U.S. men's national soccer team play the Mexican national team in that stadium, they're a very different team, because they're not used. And soccer players, they're running for 90-plus minutes a game, and they get gassed in that stadium.
Right.
And it's very different than playing in Denver. And I really wish that they had done more to prepare for this, especially with as much running as we rely on our wide receivers to do. In the second half, they're going to get gassed unless we properly manage their output in the first half. On the flip side, San Diego, they went to Denver and practiced there to prepare for this. It takes longer than a week to get ready to play at that altitude and get acclimated to it.
Right.
And so I don't think that they are going to be at full potential either, but they'll at least understand what they're in for by having practiced in the high altitude. They won't be able to play at high altitude at their normal ability, but they'll know what they're in for. And so we have that working against us.
And the elements are absolutely a factor here. Look, altitude is no joke. And then you add in the element of how many times have the Kansas City Chiefs truly played, in Mexico City? And the answer to that was what, never? Maybe once? Zero times the Chiefs have never played in Mexico City. So this is outside of anyone's realm for this team as far as climate temperature, everything, and even the environment that we will be in. We don't know if there's going to be Chargers fans or Chiefs fans. This is going to be something completely new, a whole new demographic. Everything is brand new in this game. The only thing that the Chargers really have going for them is they have been announced the home team. So this is a completely neutral environment. And how will that affect the Chiefs? You know, I feel like there's going to be a lot of Chiefs fans represented there, you know, coming from Kansas City. But also, I feel like having Patrick Mahomes, there's been a lot of, you know, fans down in Mexico that have probably taken notice of a player, you know, like our MVP.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to be a fantastic venue for the NFL to get into and get involved with, much like they've been doing with the England games.
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing murals painted all throughout Mexico of Honey Badger, of Andy Reid, of Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not saying that all of Mexico City is going to be rooting for the Chiefs, but we're going to have fans there who are there to root for the team, to root for players, who are there just for the love of the sport, and they're going to be becoming fans. And I think it's a great opportunity for Chiefs Kingdom to spread its borders and bring in some new fans as well.
And we're a family here in Chiefs Kingdom, and we love fans from all across the globe. And, you know, speaking of family, I want to talk, this is a little, you know, a family event as well. Sammy Watkins will be facing off against his brother, Jalen Watkins, who is a safety in the Chargers secondary. So it's going to be nice to see, you know, possibly the two Watkins brothers going at it. I'm not sure how that'll play out, but it could be a possibility. So I thought that was kind of a neat little thing to throw in there because we all love Sammy Watkins here in Chiefs Kingdom, and it's just neat to see, you know, some of his family, you know, there in the AFC West.
Yeah, okay. No, I think it'll be great to see those two brothers meet up and go at it. Hopefully that it doesn't end up to a family brawl.
Right, absolutely, because I'm sure you know that, you know, especially two guys in the NFL coming from the same family, I'm sure the competitive nature runs extremely deep within their blood. So, you know, let's stick to the defense here with the Chargers outside of Jalen Watkins. Look, the Chiefs really have to look out for that duo on the Chargers' defensive line and Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa. And in the last 2 games, they both have combined for 7 sacks. But on the flip side of that, the Kansas City Chiefs have only given up 18 sacks on the season and come into this game with a healthy offensive line. So, you know, with those stats being thrown out there and those 2 impact players, you know, with Eric Fisher coming back, how do you think we're going to control the offensive line? Because, you know, the line of scrimmage is going to be everything in a game like this, and we have to control the clock. So, Kris, break this down for me here and kind of give me your impact players and, you know, the role that the Chiefs are going to have to take to get, you know, the offensive victory against the Chargers.
Okay, so to throw out some other stuff really quickly, Thomas Davis, their leading tackler, may be out for this. He hasn't been practicing, and their next leader in tackles has almost half of his number of tackles, which is Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa is coming into this game having a career year. He has 48 tackles, 8.5 sacks, 14.5 tackles for loss, and 19 quarterback hits on the season.
Wow.
And up until earlier today, when we got the official word that Eric Fisher would be playing in this game, I was extremely concerned. His counterpart, like you said, Melvin Gordon, he has 4.5 sacks on the season. But those are really the only 2 players on the entire defense who can get after the quarterback.
Right.
Everyone else, the only other player who has multiple sacks on the season is a defensive back, Desmond King II, and who has 2.5, but he's a cornerback safety combo. I don't really worry about him because through 10 games he only has 2.5. I'm not extremely worried there.
Yes, and so where he sits in, where he sits. I want to say where Desmond King sits in the depth chart. He doesn't even have a starting role. Exactly.
He's their third, fourth cornerback, backup safety. When he gets on the field, okay, just keep an eye on him, but don't really worry about him. Keep him busy having to cover 3, 4 or wide receivers, a tight end. Make him have to worry about that. So how do we negate Joey Bosa? This game plan that I had was realistically more so for if we had Cam Irving, but I also think that bringing Fisher back, especially in the first quarter, will be great to be able to test out Fisher and see how he's feeling.
So we run right at him.
No. So in 4 games this year, Joey Bosa has been negated by offenses with 0 sacks and only 4 quarterback hits. Those offenses utilized the quick pass attack.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Reid has utilized this type of offense before and has been extremely successful. And so I think that we will see this early on and maybe a little bit of a mixture of it later on in the game as well. But with that quick pass, Joey Bosa doesn't have the time to get to Patrick Mahomes. And then once Eric Fisher starts to get his sea legs back and he tells the coaching staff, hey, I'm good to go, so then they can start going with a normal 5-step drop up and maybe chipping Bosa, double-teaming him, because their 2 interior linemen, their 2 defensive tackles, those guys really get a whole lot of pressure. They just hold the line, and they're built more for stopping the run.
Well, so this might be a game where obviously we want to control the line of scrimmage, but from everything that I hear from your analysis, that this most definitely should be a passing attack, which everyone in Chiefs Kingdom loves and we trust more than the running game. So this might be a scenario that's going to fall right into the favor of the Kansas City Chiefs. And so that's, to me, that could be the best outcome for a game like this.
Yes, and what I think the Chiefs, and I know we're focusing kind of on the defense-offense part right now, but I think what we need to do is, as the game goes on and as we continue to put the ball in the end zone, when especially towards the second half, we start handing the ball off more and feed Damian Williams. And because in the last 2 games that Shady hasn't played, we've seen a very different Damian Williams as the game progresses. Minus the fumble, well, he gets better as the game goes.
Yes.
And he's been averaging, if you take away the 91-yard run, he's averaging 3.8 yards per carry. With that run added in, he's averaging 6 yards per carry.
Keep in mind, though,
whereas
Damian Williams is listed as questionable for this game. Not that he will not start, but I just wanted to throw that in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. So when Shady is playing and he's getting the majority of the carries, Damian Williams is averaging 2 yards per carry. And so we need to keep feeding him because he gets stronger as the game goes on, much like a Derrick Henry, much like a Leonard Fournette. And they're going to wear you down with their physicality, and we need to utilize that, especially once we have a big lead, which we should have. Run the ball, keep the clock running, and keep getting big chunks of yards.
And that should be, the focus is managing the clock. Manage the clock. Because I do feel like the Chargers are a team that can, put some points up against us. They're not a lacking team as far as talent. They might be the team that stacks up the best against the Chiefs in our division offensively. So I feel like it's extremely imperative for the Chiefs to come out and put on a great offensive performance. But I also will say, look, the Chiefs have had the Chargers number and Phillip Rivers' number for quite some time, and I always believe that plays in our favor as well. And until that that changes, I'll still feel that way. So overall, the feeling for this game, I'm pretty confident.
Well, because you touched on the offense, I'm going to break that down really quickly.
Go for it, yeah.
Especially going with the trenches and sticking with the offensive line. So due to the injuries and inexperience along their offensive line, expect the Chargers to try to utilize their run game and quick passes to avoid putting pressure on Rivers.
Right.
Rivers has, excuse me, let's see, he's only had one game this season which he has not been sacked. He's only had 4 games with no interceptions. So in 6 games, he's thrown interceptions this year. Last week, he completed 55% of his throws. And we need another result like that from him tomorrow. I'm just going to throw that out there. And he threw 3 interceptions last week.
Let's keep that trend going.
This is going to be a great opportunity for our defense to regain its composure and take over the game.
Yes.
And start to make him question what he's seeing and where he's throwing the ball.
And that's the best thing that the Chiefs defense could do, because that's one thing over the career with Phillip Rivers. You get in his head, the game, as you might as well call the game right there, because he can't ever he gets in his own way and he cannot recover from it.
Yeah, and last week, essentially, and unfortunately 2 of them got called back due to penalties. Phillip Rivers really threw 5 interceptions last week, 4 of them in the first half. And they were just called back due to penalties. But he looked awful last week. I don't know what exactly was going on with him, but I think he was having a little bit of that Josh Darnold component where he was seeing ghosts out on the field. But if the Chiefs can stop the run and break up some of the passes and force 3rd and longs, they're going to force the Chargers into having to hold on to the ball longer because they have to wait for the receivers to get further down the field. That's going to help out our pass rush and help to pressure Rivers into making more mistakes than he normally does. Looking at their offensive line, their offensive guard, Freeney, has struggled against speed this year, so I'm expecting Chris Jones to have an effect on the game, if not a big effect on the game. Russell Okung, their left tackle, if he doesn't play, the Chargers are going to have 2 rookie tackles on the field, and they're going to have a second-year starter replacing Pouncey. They're only going to have 1 truly experienced offensive lineman in their guard, Schofield. So I really expect for our defensive line to dominate the trenches on the defensive side of the ball in tomorrow's game.
So it's really going to be the test of the defensive lines on both sides of the ball because, obviously, like we had stated earlier, Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa have a huge impact. But we have a healthy offensive line, and this is the first time we've had this healthy offensive line, I believe, since week 2. And so this is going to be, our first test, and I think that we can handle it. And we're going to be extremely aggressive, with the defense. There's no reason not to exploit all those injuries and really get in Phillip Rivers' head. Melvin Gordon's going to have a humongous game, and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are also going to have to, produce quite a bit on Monday night. But it seems like the perfect setting for everybody to see what the Chiefs are made of because we haven't got to bring a complete show to the table, and this is about as close to perfect as the Kansas City Chiefs have gotten all season, so I'm excited and ready to see what we bring to the table.
Yeah, and so since Ken Wisenhunt's firing, and you've already touched on this a little bit, Gordon has now carried the ball 20 or more times in the last 2 games. And prior to that firing, that never happened. And Gordon also had his first 100-yard game against Oakland last week. And Gordon has had at least 1 touchdown in each of his last 3 games. So he's starting to catch fire, starting to get comfortable. and the Chargers offense is finally starting to utilize him and the run game as they should have been all season. Austin Eckler, their leading rusher coming into the game, who's really the backup, he's used more as a change of pace back now that Gordon's back into his normalcy. But he's also being used as a receiver. He's the second leading receiver on the Chargers team behind Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen has 62 catches on the season. Eckler has 57. And then below them, there's a huge drop-off to their third leading receiver in Hunter Henry at the tight end. And then the only other receiver who has significant number of catches, Mike Williams, with 31.
Now, but keep this in mind. Keep this in mind, okay? There's two huge key factors here, though, Kris, is that, number one, this is a divisional game, and number two, with a player like Melvin Gordon catching fire at a time like this, what is the one kryptonite for the Kansas City Chiefs?
The running game.
Yes. And so, for me, it's a scary scenario, to hear you say that Melvin Gordon is getting his legs underneath of him because, and especially a threat out of the backfield in the passing game. That's something that the Kansas City Chiefs would look. We really have got to hone in on that.
Yeah, well, and I think if we utilize our players' ability and have certain people on the field tomorrow, defensive tackle Pennell, I think that we'll be able to truly combat the run game much better than we did last week. But in order to shut down the passing game, or at least control Keenan Allen, I'm expecting for us to match up Charvarius Ward against Keenan Allen, because Charvarius Ward has been on a bit of a tear lately, and I think that he's going to be able to match up very well with Keenan Allen. That's going to free up Rashad Breeland, who's a little bit longer in the arms, to be able to match up with Mike Williams, who last year really was the reason why they beat us in that last game, and was able to get that. He had 2 catches for touchdowns and the 2-point conversion. I think we have Rashad Breeland on him. That's going to really help to combat what he brings to the table. Because last year, he was a huge mismatch for us.
Right. Okay, so, look, I feel like we've gone over the defense and the Chargers offense enough to understand, what we have to do here, control the clock, stop the run, make sure we put pressure on Phillip Rivers, exploit the weaknesses on the offensive line, and really control the clock. So I want to switch pace here, and let's talk about our offense, because I will say, we don't talk about Patrick Mahomes as much as we should. We usually focus on other players. But look, we have Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, and Travis Kelce. Let's talk about them for a few. I don't want to talk about San Diego defense. Let's talk about our offense and what we bring to the table, and what will our what will they bring? What will they bring here for our offense in a game that's the most important game of the season?
Okay, so I'm going to say this. Travis Kelce needs 23 more receiving yards this season to reach 450 receptions and 6,000 yards faster than any other tight end in NFL history.
It's amazing.
He's a stud. I think that he does in the first 2 catches first 2 of his catches in the game on Monday night.
I look forward to seeing that.
I'm going to step out on a limb here, and I'm going to make a prediction that Patrick Mahomes sets the record for most passing yards in Mexico City by an NFL quarterback.
Okay, I can say it. I can see that.
I think, and I think that he does that in the first 3 quarters.
We're going to exploit the Chargers defense to the point that Patrick Mahomes is going to break the record in the 3rd quarter?
I think so.
I love the way you think, Kris. I love it. Okay, so you heard it first from Kris. Patrick Mahomes is going to have a career day, across the border, and we're gonna be able to experience that firsthand because it's a primetime game. And okay, so is this going to be a game where it's going to be a shootout, or can Patrick Mahomes just hit flies to Tyreek and hit Sammy and McCole, and everybody's going to do our thing that we should be doing here in Kansas City?
I think the first half we're going to be is not necessarily a shootout, but we're going to be doing our thing. And then second half, I think we kind of start to get a little winded, and we're going to rely more on our running game to wear down the defense, as well as let the wide receivers catch their breath and regain themselves for the next play. I think in the second half we're going to see a lot more switching out and rotations taking place. So we'll see a lot more of our depth players seeing the field.
In the same respect, I also want to throw this out there because you said to take, a player like Joey Bosa or Ingram out of the game. We need to get the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands faster, and I think that will also help play into, the longevity of our players throughout the second half. With shorter plays, compared to, our deep threats like we typically do run. So, I think that has to be considered in the game plan as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to also take into consideration in Patrick Mahomes' game on Monday is there's no real threat on the Chargers' secondary to intercept the pass. Now, granted, like, their defensive backs, that's their job, is to catch the ball, intercept it, knock it down, whatever. But they only have 2 players who have 2 interceptions on the season. So there's nobody back there who's really ball hawking. And so Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to sit back there and pick apart that secondary. Whether they're throwing man or zone at us, we're going to be able to move the ball against them.
I agree, and I feel pretty confident about a fresh Eric Fisher, against Joey Bosa. He seems to be shutting down these premier left ends in the league, and so that really just leaves the door. I don't want to see leaves the door open for Melvin Ingram, but then that's the player that we have to hone in on, and I really think that Mahomes can exploit the LA Chargers, and have a phenomenal day. And we just really need the special teams to step up, as well as the defense, and make sure we bring home this victory, because this is an all-important game looking forward. And to this point, I don't want to hear anything, about a bye week or the Patriots, because we have to have this one and this one only. It's important. It's do or die time. As crazy as that sounds, I don't want to say it like that, but in my mind, for our season and where we want to be, we need a winning streak moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially going into the bye week with the confidence of a win, of everybody coming out healthy and feeling good about how they're playing on the field. It's going to really help things out going through the bye week.
Yes, and with our position in the AFC West as well, it's all around. We need this victory, and so I feel like Patrick Mahomes is going to have a big day with Cheetah. Travis Kelce can absolutely get in the mix. I'd love to see McCole Hartman show us his speed again, and get to the outside and show us something on the special teams. This is your week. Special teams, I'd love to see turn around and have an impact on this game in a positive note. I'm not saying a lot of field goals. Let's create some turnovers instead of giving the ball up. Let's score points. Let's score touchdowns from our special teams. This needs to be a complete game by the Chiefs, and we've got the pieces to do it. They're back. Our pieces are back. There's no excuse moving forward.
Yeah, and this is going to be a very good opportunity for the Chiefs to really put everything together. Like you said, everybody's coming back healthy. the San Diego, the LA Chargers are not the team that everybody expected them to be. Everyone in the media, well, not everyone, a good portion of all the analysts were predicting the Chargers to win the division. And due to some injuries in the wide receiving game, and they've really only got 2 wide receivers who are really competent. They've got 3 other guys who haven't really had an effect on their season. Phillip Rivers is sitting here getting sacked 21 times this season. He's thrown 10 interceptions. Statistically, he's not his normal self. He's putting up the yards. He's got a 66% completion rate, but he's not his normal self. And the Chargers were not prepared for that from him this year.
Right.
And so I think we can really take advantage of that going into this game, set the tone, and it's nice to be able to knock or cross out the Chargers as a playoff team when we beat them on Monday night. To ruin their season essentially in the 11th week, it's going to be pretty fantastic to be able to do that.
Hey, I don't think anybody in Chief Canyon could argue with you one bit. That's a great scenario, and moving forward, it seems perfect. So, Kris, let me ask you: is there? I guess we could move on to the keys of the game here, or let me ask you what else you have to add, because we've covered the offense and the defense and special teams, and I feel like across the board, we're looking good against the Chargers. So is there anything you have to add?
The only other thing I want to throw out there is just that on offense, I mean, they're doing the best that they can. Keenan Allen's really been doing fantastic for them. I mean, again, he's been having a career year. And it's going to be really interesting with he and whoever gets matched up against him, because Keenan Allen really talks some mad trash all throughout the game. And we haven't had an incident where we've lost our cool, but last year we had a couple instances where we did that. I'm hoping that we can keep our minds about us and not let that get into our head. But on the defensive side, the Chargers haven't gotten better this offseason. Joey Bosa, like I said, he's having an amazing year, but he's pulling a Jerry Maguire where he's looking at everybody else saying, "Who's coming with me?" And nobody else is stepping up.
Right. But that's really good for this high potent Chiefs offense. And so, look, Kansas City, as much scrutiny as we've put Andy Reid through and our Chiefs team here in the last week, we've got a game to play Monday night, and it's the most important game of the season, an AFC West rival. We've got to come out of it with a victory, and I feel like we can control the clock. We have to keep Melvin Gordon in check. Put Phillip Rivers on his back the whole game, and really let Patrick Mahomes be him. Andy Reid, clock management. Let's cut the penalties down, stay disciplined, get back to fundamentals, and let's walk out of Mexico City with a victory. So, Kris, is there anything else you'd like to add to the show this evening?
I just want to see the offense air it out to begin with, and then once we get our significant lead, I'd say either 14 or more point lead, start running the ball. Protect Patrick Mahomes, protect the lead, and kill that clock. Keep the ball out of Phillip Rivers' hands. Right.
The less time the ball's in Rivers' hands, obviously, the less opportunity the Chargers have to score, and the more opportunity the Chiefs have to score. And stop those special teams blunders. No penalties. Discipline. Kansas City. That's probably my key word for this entire game and the rest of the season. So, with that being said, thank you for tuning into Kingdom Radio. This is our pregame show for the Chiefs and Chargers in Mexico City on Monday Night Football. So, Kris, thank you for being with me tonight. I really appreciate it. As always, our co-host and senior NFL analyst, You do an amazing job.
Muchas gracias.
Hey, there we go. Hey, what a way to sign off on a most important game here in Chiefs Kingdom. Kris, you have a great night. Chiefs Kingdom, you have a great night as well. And we look forward to this Monday night game.
Thank you for tuning in to Kingdom Radio, your go-to podcast for everything Kansas City Chiefs.